Thanks for tuning into Card Player TV. I'm Lizzie Harrison here with Glen Chorny. How's everything going for you?
Everything's going great. I'm happy to be here and to be with you, Lizzie.
Thank you very much. Well, today I want to talk to you a little bit about pot control, specifically pot control with one pair. Now, what factors go into you deciding when you want to keep a pot small?
Well, I don't know. It obviously depends on what the opponent has first, but I mean, if you think you can get paid on one street, or if you can control the size of the pot, and especially if you're bluffing, right, then you don't have to commit that much more to the pot, right?
That makes sense. So why do you think so many players these days preach small ball poker?
Well, I mean, I think it's key to be able to play flops with amateurs nowadays, just because of the amount of continuation betting you can do and just winning the pot. Not necessarily continuation betting the flop, but when I mean continuation betting, you can continuation bet the turn as well, you know?
So how are you able to use position to control the size of the pot?
I don't know. You can increase the pot in position, or you can just keep it small in position. I mean, pre-flop, that's how it works. But, I mean, obviously it's the same on the flop, too. A position gives you the advantage of being able to put more chips in the pot or less.
Well, you mentioned playing against amateur players. How different is it, and how do you have to play differently when you're playing against someone that really isn't going to understand the intricacies of the game?
You have to think totally differently when you're in a hand against
You
someone.
have to think like you are them?
Yeah, you have to be able to put yourself in their shoes, so to speak, you know? You have to be able to jump from situation to situation. Poker is all about situations to me. And I definitely don't think I've seen every situation, but I've seen a lot of them before, and everything helps, you know?
Well, everybody talks about changing gears. How often do you change gears?
I'm probably one of the people that's always changing gears. I mean, I go from being tight to aggressive regularly, and I think it's an important dynamic of my game.
So let's go back to position. If you're out of position, how are you able to control the pot? How are you able to control the hand in general, or are you?
Well, I mean, if you're out of position, you should be, if you're an amateur player and not like a professional player that likes to play a lot of flops and whatnot, you should only be hoping like decent hands, like decent starting hands, you know, like a king-jack minimum or something like that. If you're out of position and you really feel you have a disadvantage against who you're playing against, then you really want to play tight. Like, honestly, there's no point in building up a pot if you're not as good as your opponent is. If you're gonna raise king 10 and then fold when a jack high flop comes down every single time, then there's no point in raising king 10, because you're not gonna hit a flop with that hand more than you would not.
So how do you gauge if your opponent is better than you or worse than you? You've mentioned it a couple times, like if the player's better or worse, but how do you gauge that?
Well, I think obviously you have to sit down and like watch the table right away as soon as you're there. I mean, I can't tell in the first like 5 minutes if who's better than me at the table. I mean, there's just some players who will be better than you, you know, like you sitting down at a table with Phil Hellmuth or Phil Ivey, you're probably going to think they're better than you, you know, unless you have a big ego, you know, but lots of players have egos, so.
What's the best way to face a player like that? Have you sat down at a table with Hellmuth or Ivey?
Actually, I've never played live with either of them before, but...
Well, what's the best way to face a pro like that? I'm sure you've played with some big-name pros. I know you played with Antonio a lot in Monte Carlo.
I played with Antonio and I played with Daniel, and it's every hand, like I said, is situational to me, and like saying that you can play a pro a certain way, especially a specific pro, is kind of a tough thing to do. I just like to play a lot of situations, and I don't know, every level you're playing in a tournament can be different with a pro, you know? Like, they could be changing gears every level, you could be changing gears, and it's a whole...
You just want to keep one step ahead of them?
It's a whole mind war kind of thing going on, but sometimes people are just going to get lucky against you.
Well, how do you deal with it when people get lucky? I mean, it's got to be very frustrating, especially if it's a player who you think is worse than you.
Well, I mean, it just happened to me in there, and a guy called off, like, he raised me 10,000 pre-flop, and I shoved 2 jacks for 45K, and he called 35,000 more with ace-king after taking like 10 seconds, and I don't know, he was just kind of in a marginal spot for him, and he turned a king against me, so, I mean, it doesn't really affect my game, but it just kind of frustrates you more than anything, you know, but whatever, that's why we play poker, to play against the people who are marginal players.
So you think if the
That's where the money is.
Right, absolutely. I mean, if everybody was winning, then there would be no prize pools.
Well, that's why we have the term fish. That's why, I'm not saying that he was a fish or anything like that, but I'm just saying that's why we have that term, and that's why cash games exist, especially. People that want to just jump in for a few hands and then jump out and lose a bunch of money. And
it works for you, right?
Well, it doesn't matter to me at all. I mean, I'm happy to take their money.
Great. Thank you very much for stopping by today, Glenn.
My pleasure, Lizzie.
I'm Lizzie Harrison with Glen Chorny for Card Player TV.